Welcome to Going Through Health with Gordy and Zed.
Where wellness gets a fun twist. I'm Gordy Jenkins, a natural foods entrepreneur, and with me is Dr. Zed DeBout, our resident trained Stanford MD. We are former college swim teammates turned best friends, and now your guide to this crazy world of health trends and fitness hacks with a focus on getting the science right. Get ready for a wild ride. This is Going Through Health with Gordy and Zed. Get your bingo cards ready. Today is all about B12. B12? Vitamin B12. If you are some combination of an Australian soldier, a sickly vegan child, or a celebrity searching for your B12 injection, this episode is for you. Zed and I will go through the history, science, and trend that is vitamin B12. After that, we shine the science spotlight on, of course, what happens when you eat too much polar bear liver as we talk vitamin poisoning in the Arctic. Before we wrap up, as always, with our Fastfire Questions. But before we play Vitamin Bingo, let's see what Dr. Zed, Vitamin Z1, found as he's bingoing through health this week.
Thanks, Vitamin G.
Yeah, man. Sure, that was a heavy sentence for you. I'm sorry.
If you need to rewind and listen at slower speed, I think you'll find it's worth your while. All right, so for going through health this week, I actually found this on our science on Reddit. So it's this article called "Plastic Eating Insect Discovered in Kenya," and this was from a senior scientist in the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology. But basically, quick overview, they found mealworm larvae capable of consuming polystyrene in Kenya. So mealworms making meals out of polystyrene. And polystyrene we know and love. We've covered it in a couple episodes just peripherally, but it's commonly known as styrofoam. It's widely used and very difficult to degrade, but traditional recycling methods can be fairly costly and they produce pollutants. And so there's been a lot of this type of exploration. Are there biological solutions to degrade this plastic? So the Kenyan lesser mealworm, the specific mealworm, it's a larval form of the Alphitobius darkling beetle, pretty badass name.
Yeah,
and it can
cool name.
consume polystyrene with the aid of gut bacteria.
With its own gut bacteria. I don't need to throw up on it, right?
Right. You don't need to give it a suppository or anything.
Right, cool.
Transplant. But yeah, really adding insult to injury for this lesser mealworm. Hey, lesser mealworm, eat trash. Enjoy the styrofoam.
Yeah. I know why we call it the lesser. That feels like it's a pretty important one. What's the greater mealworm doing?
Yeah, it only eats foie gras. But yeah, so the research findings, the trial showed mealworms, these lesser mealworms, fed a diet of polystyrene and bran, survived better and consumed polystyrene more efficiently than those on a polystyrene-only diet. So even lesser mealworms preferring some variety, I guess.
Good.
But yeah, it found that these mealworms on the mixed diet broke down approximately 11.7% of styrene over the trial period. So I guess they were pooping out or accumulating the other 88.3%.
Yeah, but that was interesting. I was like, what is their poop though? It's just like I think it's probably like carbon dioxide and like just smaller fragments of the plastic's like molecular structure, so they're like probably easier for the environment to take care of and things like that.
Well, I think so. Their gut bacteria, so it includes that the article said it included a couple different species, including Lactococcus, Citrobacter, and Klebsiella. So these were abundant in their digestive systems, and they are known for producing some of these enzymes that can digest the synthetic plastics. But yeah, it's basically the ability of these bacteria to break down the actual plastic polymers, and that's what supports this potential for microbial solutions to address plastic waste. So it's kind of reduce, reuse, recycle, and then retching, me throwing up watching this worm poop out styrofoam. But I still feel like the important part here is reducing and not relying on mealworms to force feed them our leftover coffee cups.
No, yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. But we have the coffee cups, so
yeah, might as well. Yeah, so the researchers mentioned a couple of future directions for study. So they talked about how the study emphasizes the potential of isolating specific bacterial strains from these microbiomes and for large-scale plastic waste management. But they also talked about investing the scalability of enzyme production to ensure the insect health over prolonged plastic consumption as a future goal. So really looking out for these poor mealworms, like the worms crossing the cricket lines eventually. We'd rather eat shit and loam, not this freaking styrofoam. Give us a break. But I also think this is probably how the dune worms originated. They started as these plastic breakdown organisms, but they grew and grew until eventually they developed a taste for human flesh.
All right. So you're saying this is a bad thing?
I'm just saying.
What I'm hearing here.
We'll need a lisan al-gaib if this all plays out.
That's cool.
Well.
That's cool though. That's why I'm fascinated. That's why I asked the question though about the poop of this, because it's interesting to me, like how you're coming from styrofoam to something that is a lesser evil to the world is what.
Oh right, like what
was interesting.
The actual constituents.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like
Gotcha.
what literally is that? But cool. Yeah, super interesting.
All right. Well, after that little detour to a worm's bottom, Gordy, what's our subjective today?
Subjective. Well, our subject today is vitamin B12. So let's just take the GTH time machine back to the early 1900s. Very specific, just let's go early 1900s. Beep, 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 beep. Wow, look at this. It's the early 1900s around us. So early in the century. Were you going to say the same thing?
Basically, I can just tell.
Well, in the early 1900s, a diagnosis of pernicious anemia was essentially a slow death sentence. Pernicious anemia. Yeah, it's not that fun-sounding thing that we think of it as today, right? Patients faded like ghosts, fatigued, pale, plagued by numbness, until ultimately succumbing to organ failure. Doctors watched helplessly as their patients wasted away. The condition was so poorly understood that the best treatment available involved rest, just like the doctor telling you stop doing everything, because everything could be causing it. Just stop all the stuff that you've been doing that got you pernicious anemia in the first place. Brainiac, just stop all that. But because this wasn't particularly effective. But hope came, ironically, in a canine test subject. Dr. George Whipple, a researcher in the 1920s, was experimenting on dogs, because of course he was, and as we know from old-timey, sketchy science, he probably just didn't have an orphan to test available.
or a grave body.
Oh, yeah, or like a corpse that he's dug up.
Yeah.
But back then, said there was nothing in the rule book at the time that said a dog couldn't be experimented on. Shout out Airbud for changing medical ethics. George Whipple discovered that dogs bled to near death could regenerate their red blood cells by consuming raw liver. File that under the least favorite thing I've heard today. What an awful experiment.
Awful. Really hope that was the first and only food he tried and it worked immediately. And he's like, we're good.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want him starting with like the grass and the carrots and the tree bark and all this other stuff.
My nearly dead dog just will not eat this carrot.
Oh, so true. But Dr. Whipple's finding caught the attention of Dr. George Minot and Dr. William Murphy, who suspected the same might be true for humans. Fun fact, George Minot's grandfather founded Mass General Hospital in Boston. Cover your ears, Ed. Both of these guys, Harvard med guys. Oh, no.
That's me throwing up liver.
Okay, good. With the finesse of mad scientists, these two began prescribing generous portions of liver to the anemic patients. You get a liver, you get a liver, everybody gets a liver.
Hey, Gordy.
Yeah?
You know why Harvard doctors prescribe liver?
Why did Harvard doctors prescribe liver?
Because they don't have hearts.
So would a compassionate doctor prescribe a heart?
No, they would prescribe it because it has vitamin B12.
Hey, I'm learning. I'm not a doctor. This is new to me. The results of this liver handout was nothing short of miraculous. Patients once at death's door came bounding back to life like Lazarus mixed with Hannibal Lecter. One woman is quoted saying, "Doctor, I feel better than I have in years." That's exactly how she sounded.
Spot on, early 1900s, Mass General patient.
Yeah. And better yet, she wasn't the only one. The findings were so groundbreaking that Whipple, Minot, and Murphy snagged the Nobel Prize in 1934. Snagged it. But the story wasn't over. Scientists were still left scratching their heads. What in the liver was working this magic? All right, GTH time machine real quick to the 1940s. No time for nonsense, please. Preferably not Germany during this time. Here we go. Welcome to the 1940s. Researchers finally isolate the active compound, vitamin B12, a molecule as complex as its history. To put the scale of their work into perspective, isolating a single gram of B12 required the processing of 4,000 pounds of liver. That is enough liver to sober up Arrowhead Stadium in just 1 quarter.
Ironically, no B12 in Arrowhead Stadium attendees' livers.
That's true. Hey, fun fact, average liver weighs about 3.3 pounds. Enjoy. Vitamin B12 is also known as cobalamin, named for the cobalt atom at the center of its molecular structure. In supplements and fortified foods, it often appears as cyanocobalamin, a stable synthetic form that contains a tiny, harmless molecule of cyanide. Isn't that crazy? It's a complex-looking molecule. I looked up the structure of it. It's quite the web of capital letters and lines. B12, it turns out, is the quintessential underdog of vitamins. Unlike its flashier counterparts, B12 doesn't come from fruits, vegetables, or even your everyday meat. It's produced exclusively by bacteria working quietly in the guts of animals, and until recently, hiding in the shadows of nutritional science. But its job? Vital. It fuels the creation of red blood cells, maintains a healthy nervous system, and even plays a role in DNA production. Without it, your body slowly unravels, one pernicious cell at a time. And so, a once deadly condition became not only treatable but curable thanks to the collective efforts of some determined scientists, a few unlucky dogs, and a whole lot of liver. The Nobel-winning trio showed that science at its best can take what seems like an unsolvable mystery and chip away at it until a cure emerges. Their work laid the foundation for an entirely new understanding of nutrition and deficiency diseases. But the story just doesn't end in the lab. Today, vitamin B12 continues to intrigue and confound. Modern diets, especially vegetarian and vegan ones, often lack this essential nutrient, leading to fortified foods, supplements, and even those trendy B12 shots favored by celebrities. Vitamin B12 remains a fascinating reminder that even the tiniest compounds can wield enormous power over life and death. From its hidden origins in bacterial synthesis to its crucial role in human survival, B12 has earned a spot as one of science's great underdog stories, proving that sometimes a little bit of liver goes a long way.
A little bit of liver in my life. So I guess, first of all, pour one out for the 6 feet underdogs.
For sure.
But thank you for your service.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if they used to call them Labrador tests, but they shortened it to lab tests. But yeah, it's because
that's what dog called labs.
Yeah. But no, that's wild. It sucks about the dogs. Great that they found B12. Yeah, wish we could have cut out the middleman, and our best friends would have had a little happier.
They would have. But that's the subjective today. Hit us with the objective. Objectify me, Captain.
All right. So you did an awesome job covering this a little bit. So just to review, vitamin B12, also known as cobalamin, it's water soluble. It's a water soluble vitamin, and it plays this crucial role in everything from DNA synthesis to red blood cell production formation, as well as neurological function. As far as natural sources go, so aside from just liver or beef liver. It's naturally found in some other animal products, including meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and dairy. It's also these days available in a lot of fortified foods. So like you'll see breakfast cereals or plant-based milk alternatives that have been fortified with vitamin B12 and some of these other vitamins, for not just for vegetarians and vegans, but to make sure people are getting it in their diet if they're not getting enough from the liver or the other food sources. Deficiency symptoms, so fatigue, weakness, and anemia are all due to impaired red blood cell production. I always feel like fatigue is a symptom for so many things. It's such a broad one. But just a quick reminder that you aren't supposed to feel tired and crappy all the time. So it's not necessarily because of vitamin B12, but yeah, it's not normal to always be tired.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
All right. So there's, in terms of other deficiency symptoms, there are neurological issues such as numbness, tingling, memory problems, and mood disturbances. And then in severe cases, like if you've been bled out by a scientist on the point of death's door, deficiency can actually lead to irreversible nerve damage and cognitive impairment. So irreversible, the worst of the reversible. Never mind. Right.
Reverse those options.
Yeah, a bad one. In terms of actionable recommended daily intake, it does vary a little bit by age, sex, and life stage, but generally adults require about 2.4 micrograms per day. So that's about, if it helps for context, that's about 1/100 millionth of Gordy's weight.
Did you do the math on that?
I did.
Did that come out?
Also didn't include nearly enough decimal places for it to be remotely helpful. But yeah, that was the rounding.
Maybe some margin of error.
Yeah. But there are some increased needs during pregnancy and breastfeeding. It's more so for the pregnant woman, not the partner. You don't need to increase your uptake if your partner is pregnant or breastfeeding, unless you're deficient, I guess. In terms of supplementation, it is available in oral form. So we love our tablets. We love our capsules. Oh, give us some sublingual options. But there are also the injectable forms, which you mentioned, for those with either absorption issues or celebrities. It's commonly recommended for individuals with dietary restrictions, as we covered, such as your vegetarians and vegans, or those with absorption difficulties. So kind of really interestingly, and we'll get into this a little bit more in terms of how B12 is ingested and sort of broken down. But the most common cause of B12 deficiency in developed countries is impaired absorption due to a loss of gastric intrinsic factor. So that's a glycoprotein, which must be bound to a food source of vitamin B12 in order for absorption to occur. So as an analogy, so back to the Chiefs, Arrowhead Stadium, you can't score a touchdown without the ball in your hand. You have to be bound to the football, and the ball has to cross the plane of the end zone, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, you need this intrinsic factor to absorb the B12.
Okay. That makes sense.
All right. Who might need supplements? So we covered it a little bit in terms of vegetarians, vegans, people who have dietary restrictions, dogs who have lost most of their blood in a Harvard doctor's experiment would need it. Older adults, as absorption decreases with age. Individuals with gastrointestinal disorders, so your Crohn's disease, celiac disease, shout out gluten episode, or those who have undergone gastrointestinal surgery. And then individuals with pernicious anemia, where intrinsic factor production is impaired. So back to all those people who were kind of fading away without vitamin B12, it was actually because a lot of them weren't able to properly produce intrinsic factor to help with that vitamin B12 absorption.
Oh, that's interesting.
Straightforward to the lab tests. It's super helpful to get lab tests in general, but specifically in this case, there's a handful of direct-to-consumer companies out there like Function Health. I believe they actually qualify for HSA and FSA now, but you can also just ask your doctor. Apparently levels of serum methylmalonic acid, that's MMA, that's a B12-associated metabolite, and those are supposed to be the most sensitive markers of vitamin B12 status. So try to say cobalamin metabolite 5 times fast.
Cobalamin metabolite, cobalamin metabolite, cobalamin metabolite, cobalamin metabolite, cobalamin metabolite, cobalamin metabolite.
All right, well, that was 6, so you failed. But honestly, pretty good for the first 5. I thought you had it.
Waiting for an opportunity to say that.
All right. In terms of safety and interactions, last thing here, B vitamins, B12 vitamins, all these water-soluble vitamins are generally very safe. It's really hard to overdose because your body simply excretes it via urine. But as always, it's smart to consult with your doctor, with your healthcare provider before starting any supplement, especially if you have any underlying health conditions or are taking other medications and supplements. But yeah, that's the objective.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. And I'm excited to share with you a few more things I learned while going through B12. But let's take a quick second to pause and hear from our sponsors today.
Hi, I'm Rufus, one of Dr. Whipple's former canine test subjects. You know, the guy who discovered that liver could cure pernicious anemia? Oh yeah, turns out he figured that out by bleeding me and my pals nearly dry and then force-feeding us raw liver. Rough life, huh? Saving lives shouldn't come at the cost of man's best friend. But thanks to Minot and Murphy's miracle liver patties, no dog has to suffer for science again, right? Their liver is hand-selected, scientifically backed, and human-approved. No experiments necessary. So if you're feeling sluggish, pale, or like you've been staring into the void of numbness and fatigue, grab yourself a mouthful of old-fashioned liver. Take it from me, Rufus, Minot and Murphy's miracle liver patties. There's a reason why it's called liver and not deader.
Welcome back, everyone. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and rate us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. New episodes Monday morning at goingthroughhealth.podcast on Instagram. We lost a Spotify follower, so please make sure it wasn't you by accident or someone you know. Please call our anonymous tip hotline if you know someone who might have unfollowed us. We will protect your identity, and we're working on compiling a list of suspects right now.
All right, Gordy, we are talking about B12. I think it's time to break down our impressions and share some asides as part of our assessment.
Assessment time. Zed, you can't talk about vitamin B12 without mentioning what I'm about to tell you. The 1950s were a time of experimentation, not just in music and fashion, but also in diets. As veganism gained traction among those looking for alternative ways to live healthier or more ethical lives, an alarming trend began to emerge. Doctors started seeing mysterious cases of severe anemia and neurological problems in strict vegans, particularly in children raised on plant-based diets. What was going on? And Zed, I know it's kind of interesting talking with you because I know you kind of go through periods. I don't know if you are right now. Are you doing any specific diet right now?
Yeah, I try to do mostly plant-based if I'm cooking for myself, but if I'm out and about or eating with friends or like they're hosting or something, I don't get too fussy, but yeah, generally.
Yeah. Well, cool. And I think people are very aware of this nowadays, and you can live healthily or even more healthy. But it turns out these early adopters of veganism were unaware of a critical flaw in their diets, which was the total absence of vitamin B12. And as we know, unlike other essential nutrients, B12 doesn't come from fruits, vegetables, or grains. Instead, it's produced by bacteria, and it's primarily found in animal products like meat, eggs, and dairy. So the consequences of deficiency weren't just fatigue and weakness. In severe cases, it led to irreversible nerve damage, as Zed mentioned, and developmental delays in children. One of the first high-profile cases to catch the public's attention involved a vegan family in the United Kingdom. And their child was admitted to the hospital after suffering from severe developmental delays. The doctors were baffled, and it wasn't until they examined the family's diet free of all animal products that they identified the cause. It's our old friend, pernicious anemia, triggered by an almost complete lack of B12. It sounded like I said V12. Triggered by an almost complete lack of B12. I just needed that American muscle.
I was going to say, the American auto industry's worst nightmare. Lack of B12.
The case made headlines, sparking a flurry of warnings from nutrition experts about the risks of strict vegan diets without supplementation.
Yeah, just to go back to the pernicious anemia naming real quickly, I feel like we could use more adjectives in medical diagnosis nomenclature, like doctor, like, oh, you have anemia. And the patient's like, is that good or bad? Like, let's be a little more specific. Doctor's like, all right, you have agonizing pernicious anemia.
Pernicious, huh? Oh man.
Let me guess. Yeah, I think it would just be helpful. But yeah,
I was hoping I had whimscal anemia or something like that.
or like bodacious anemia.
Yeah. Giggling anemia. Like, I have ticklish anemia. Actually, ticklish anemia sounds hellish.
I'm quite sick.
Look at me go. Look at me ride my hospital bed. All right. So today, most vegans are aware of the need for supplements or fortified foods, but these early adopters walked a rocky road.
Oh, gonna hold you up right there. Rocky road, not vegan. Sorbet road, maybe.
That's fair. All right.
Sorry, I gotta be a stickler on this stuff.
Thanks for keeping me honest. People love vegans. This vegan crisis led to a broader understanding of how essential nutrients like B12 are, not just for adults, but also essential for growing children. It also catalyzed the rise of fortified foods such as cereal and plant-based milks, which often have added B12 to ensure nutritional balance. Speaking of fortified food, this one is very cool and must be absolutely very exciting for our very real Australian listener base, provided they were not the ones who unfollowed us on Spotify.
Aussie.
Enter Vegemite. Vegemite is in fact vegan. I don't know. Not supposed to be a big reveal, but yeah, it's made from
root word like vegetable.
Whoa! But it's made from brewer's yeast extract, a byproduct of beer production. As you know, yeast isn't really a plant or animal; it's a fungus, technically. Shout out to Lion's Mane mushroom episode, and thus vegan friendly. So this salty Australian spread has been around since 1923, but it wasn't exactly flying off the shelves. Created by chemist Cyril Callister as a local alternative to Marmite, Vegemite's big break came during World War II. And said, there's one thing I know, it's I always like my food invented by a chemist and popularized through war.
That reminds me, when is McDonald's going to bring back the McMary, McCurry, incandescent McFlurry?
when they cycle out the McDrones or whatever. With key B vitamin-rich foods like meat and dairy in short supply due to the war, the Australian government turned to Vegemite as a national health campaign. And before long, Vegemite became a hero in addressing vitamin deficiencies in Australia, as it was rich in B vitamins like B1, B2, and B3, though it wasn't a significant source of B12 until it was later fortified. Advertisements urged citizens to eat Vegemite for strength and vitality. Soldiers were issued tins and doctors prescribed it to pregnant women and children to ward off malnutrition. One 1940s ad boldly proclaimed, "Vegemite fights with the army. Are you keeping fit?" By 1942, the product was so critical to public health that its production was tightly regulated, prioritizing the military and those nutritionally at risk.
You gotta fight for your right to Vegemite.
To Vegemite. Though not loved by everyone, American GIs famously compared Vegemite to salty axle grease. Vegemite became a symbol of resilience and health. And after the war, it remained an Australian staple. Slathered on toast. Just slather it right on the toast there. Slather it on. And how about slather it on that sandwich? Slather it everywhere. It's a salty, polarizing spread with a rich history, though, Zed. And if nothing else, it taught the world a valuable lesson about the power of fortified foods. Yeah, you like that? Have you ever tried Vegemite before, Zed?
I have, and I hated it, but you want to know something weird?
Sure.
I actually like salty axle grease, so it was weird.
So it's weird. So you don't think it's accurate. It doesn't taste like that.
Totally
American
it does
axle
not
grease.
taste like salty axle grease.
Trust me, man.
It's shit.
Maybe some of the synthetic stuff.
No, but I haven't actually tried it. But have you tried it?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Ugh, yeah.
I mean, I really want to try it again, though. I want to try it again, appreciate it. I tried it when I was a kid. My parents went to Australia and came back, and they brought it, and I had it, and I was probably furious. I don't know. However I reacted when I tried something I didn't like. How could you do this to me?
Pernicious Vegemite.
It did clear up my anemia. It did clear up my anemia. Yeah.
I'm just kind of imagining it as like kind of really crappy peanut butter, but maybe it's way off.
No, it's more like just like sour.
Way worse.
Yeah. We should have it. We'll eat it while recording one
Ooh,
day.
the
There we
boys
go.
eat Vegemite. All right.
Yeah, we'll have an
Whole
Australian
episode.
health episode.
Ooh,
All right, there we go. All right, cool. We're on to something good. But Zed, what are some things that you found interesting or compelling this week?
All right. So these are a couple things I came across that I found that piqued my interest. And again, not comprehensive here, but just a few items. So first of all, B12 absorption via whole foods. So we hinted at this earlier, or I don't know if hinted is the right word, but vitamin B12 is bound to protein in food. And so it must be released before it can be absorbed by the body. The process actually starts in the mouth of all places when the food is mixed with saliva. So the saliva actually frees the vitamin B12 and allows it to bind to haptocorin, which is a cobalamin binding protein in the saliva. And then more, so that's not where all of the vitamin B12 is separated from the food. It's more is actually separated in the stomach by the activity of hydrochloric acid and these gastric protease in the stomach, and it continues to bind to haptocorin in the stomach. And then in the duodenum, which is a section of the small intestine, additional digestive enzymes free the vitamin B12 from that haptocorin. So the haptocorin is carrying it along. And then in the duodenum, these enzymes free it from the haptocorin. And this vitamin B12 then combines with intrinsic factor, which we remember is essential for absorption. And it's a transport and delivery binding protein secreted by the stomach's parietal cells. So that intrinsic factor comes from the stomach's parietal cells. It flows into the duodenum with the B12, and then it catches the free B12 from the haptocorin and continues sort of its path. So the resulting complex of intrinsic factor and vitamin B12 is actually absorbed in the distal ileum, so later on in the small intestine, by receptor-mediated endocytosis. So basically, there's a receptor, it detects the presence of this complex and pulls in that vitamin B12 intrinsic factor complex. So if vitamin B12, so that's all with these whole food, when vitamin B12 is bound to protein in food. But if vitamin B12 is added to fortified foods and dietary supplements, it's actually already in its free form, and therefore it does not require that separation step before it's bound by haptocorin.
Oh, that's interesting. So basically what you're saying, it's a big team effort. Like saliva, stomach, acids, enzymes, all working together to free B12, and then they hand it off to its delivery partner, that intrinsic factor for absorption. Is that right? Is that
Exactly. So that's why if you have issues with any of these areas, whether it's intrinsic factor not being secreted because of damage or to your parietal cells, like in the case of pernicious anemia, or if you've had, for example, gastric bypass surgery, or you have Crohn's, which affects your distal ileum where that absorption occurs. So all these things can contribute to vitamin B12 deficiency.
Oh, interesting.
All right. So that is sort of how the body absorbs B12 from whole foods in its bound form. But next up, B12 injections. So these are kind of growing in popularity in outpatient settings or like health spa settings. The gist is you can get around any absorption or bioavailability issues with these intramuscular injections or IV pushes. I was looking around just online. There's direct to consumer injection kits where you can get these little vitamin B12 shots, and they're advertised at like $12 a shot. I really think they should call those bee stings though. But yeah, then it's like over $100 at least if you're at a health spa getting this IV cocktail with B12. But you see these popping up a lot. But actually, in light of all these kind of injection methods, there's a 2018 Cochrane review, which included 3 randomized controlled trials that compared very high doses of oral B12 with intramuscular injections of vitamin B12 in these patients with vitamin B12 deficiency. And the evidence from these studies, so basically taking the supplement like orally versus injecting it in patients that were deficient, found that there wasn't a ton of difference in the ability of high oral doses to normalize serum vitamin B12 versus intramuscular. So basically, they're seeing equal efficacy. So you don't need to do this injection if you don't want to, or this IV method. You can actually just take pretty high doses.
It totally just feels cool, right? It's just kind of like, I feel like it's like I'm so intense. Like this has to be good for me, right? Like this is
it goes back a little bit to that placebo episode. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, that mindset. Like
it does just sound cool.
Real procedure,
right? Like $12 a shot for like something that could be like $24 for a bottle of vitamins, or who knows? That's interesting. Cool.
All right, and I actually saw that around here I saw this vitamin B12 experience where you could go on this yacht and like cruise the ocean for an hour and a half and then get a vitamin B12 drip at the end just to like replenish your energy and chill. But so all kinds of little interesting hustles out there. But yeah,
What are we doing with?
Not a bad way.
I'm just at the end of this episode, everyone make sure you inject yourself with the Gordy and Zed's GTH vitamin B12 made in my bathroom. All right.
All right. So next thing that I found that I thought was kind of cool was, cool's not the right word, but interesting. The article is called Treatment of Vitamin B12 Deficiency, Methylcobalamin, Cyanocobalamin, Hydroxycobalamin, Clearing the Confusion. So basically, this was published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2015.
Consider the confusion cleared. Thank you.
Are you confused now? Basically, vitamin B12 has two active forms per this paper. There's methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. And methylcobalamin is increasingly being used and promoted in treating B12 deficiency via supplementation form, but both forms are essential with distinct metabolic roles and functions. So methylcobalamin is crucial for hematopoiesis, so that's formation of red blood cells, and then also brain development during childhood. And adenosylcobalamin is important for carbohydrate, fat, and amino acid metabolism, as well as myelin formation. All that to say that treating B12 deficiency should involve a combination of both forms and not just rely on one versus the other, because they are both important active forms.
Interesting. So it's like B12 has two superhero forms, one for brain power and blood and the other for metabolism and nerve health. And so like the best treatment, the two team up.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll miss out on some of the effects of B12, essential effects of B12, if you're just taking one versus the other, especially if you're deficient, particularly if you're deficient. So yeah, curious if you had to choose two superheroes to respond to an emergency. It could be any type of emergency, but which two would you pick?
Any type of emergency, and they just respond to it.
Like you don't know. They go, like you don't know. Basically, like you sign up this policy with your insurer, and you're like, under the case of any type of emergency, you only have these two superheroes to help you out.
Yeah, I got an answer for you. There's two superheroes are called Mom and Dad. All right, no. For serious though, I would say probably one of like this Marvel characters that has like borderline wizard skills, and my dad.
Smart.
Just kidding, Mom. I love you. I'd definitely choose like one of those like, like the Marvel characters that like jump the shark, that like make the movies not as fun because they're like so powerful that they can basically like break
OP,
the universe, like Captain Marvel or something. Just like come on over and like, like your liver is fine or whatever. That's what I would do.
So not Hawkeye. Okay, interesting.
No, not Hawkeye. Hawk liver, maybe.
I wonder if Hawkeye has seen any bump secondarily to like the Hawk Tua thing and stuff. Like, Hawkeye on that thing.
Accidentally finding him.
Yeah.
Accidentally.
This guy sucks. All right. Last thing I found pretty interesting was this paper called A Functional Evaluation of Anti-Fatigue and Exercise Performance Improvement Following Vitamin B Complex Supplementation in Healthy Humans, a randomized double-blind trial. So this was in the International Journal of Medical Sciences in 2023. But basically, they weren't just taking vitamin B12. They took a bunch of different B vitamins, and basically they hypothesized that 28-day vitamin B supplementation would enhance physical performance and reduce fatigue in these participants. So the study evaluated the anti-fatigue effects of vitamin B1, B2, B6, and B12 on exercise performance. So can't really delineate what was doing what specifically, but this sort of complex as a whole with these multiple B vitamins. They did this randomized double-blind crossover design for their methodology. They had 32 participants total. So basically they took 16 participants and they didn't get B vitamins, and the other 16 did get B vitamins, placebo versus the B vitamin treatment, and with a 28-day supplementation period followed by a 14-day washout period. They found that the supplementation group, they significantly increased their running time in this running test to exhaustion by 1.26 compared to before supplementation. And then they also found that the supplementation group significantly reduced blood lactate and ammonia levels during and after exercise compared to the placebo. So their takeaways were that this vitamin B complex supplementation improved exercise endurance and reduced fatigue without adverse effects when taken at appropriate doses.
Well, that's cool. So wait, I shared with you recently my recent lab results for my B12. With something like me taking B12, if I already have what they say, you are perfect, you have the best B12 ever,
We've ever seen,
making kids with pernicious anemia super jealous. Will stuff like this help me if I already have like enough B12 in my system?
So
that's what I'm so super curious about.
Yeah. So interestingly, in this study, they didn't test any participants' vitamin B levels before or after. It was just these athletic and endurance tests. So it was unclear whether these participants were deficient in any of the B vitamins, but they were relatively healthy, athletic individuals with no prior issues or medical concerns, but unclear their vitamin B levels. But it's also like a very small number of people, so hard to really generalize with these level. But also from the all the papers I read and sort of the broad search of the literature, it seems like if you're not deficient, there aren't necessarily a ton of benefits. It's which is pretty intuitive, but again, wish this study would have had any sort of evidence around pre and post vitamin B levels.
Yeah, well, cool though. That's interesting. I'll definitely keep an eye out for like athletic performance based things with B12 because I find that aspect of health super interesting.
Definitely.
But Zed, here is the kicker. You ever wondered why vitamins have the names they do? Take the B vitamins, for instance. You have B1, B2, B3, all the way up to B12. There's a few missing. I'll tell you about those. But indeed, it is like a lineup at a bingo hall, as we've said, but it's actually the result of some fascinating science and a little human error. Vitamins were named in the early 1900s as scientists discovered essential compounds that the body couldn't produce on its own. They started with vitamine, like vitamin with an E at the end, combining vita, Latin for life, and amine, which is a type of chemical compound. But not all vitamins were amines, so they dropped the E and the term vitamin stuck.
Big meeting with the marketing firm, like getting ready for the Super Bowl ad. It's like vitamin on the slide in big letters, and then the next slide, the E is crossed out. All the scientists falling backwards out of their chairs.
First, big reveal. Big reveal. Oh man. And vitamins are categorized using letters, as we know, but only 13 essential vitamins are officially recognized: A, C, D, E, K, and the B complex, which includes 8 between B1 and B12. The gaps in the vitamin alphabet, like F, G, and H, come from early contenders that didn't make the cut once scientists realized they weren't essential or were already produced by the body. The B vitamins were discovered in rapid succession, and because they all helped with metabolism, they were lumped together in the same family, the Bs. But the numbers don't always mean they're related. They just reflect the order in which they were identified. And as I mentioned, not every B between 1 and 12 made the cut. B4, B8, B10, and B11. I should bingo. B4, B8, B10, B11.
So you sunk my battleship. We were supposed to take turns.
These were originally thought to be vitamins, but were later disqualified. Get out of here, B4, B8, B10, and B11, when scientists realized our bodies could produce them, or they weren't essential. So we're left with this oddly incomplete set of Bs. And our star today, B12. It's the showstopper. As we mentioned, it's chemically unique, containing a cobalt atom at its core, which gives it the name cobalamin. It also has the most complex structure of all the vitamins. So while the numbers might seem arbitrary, they each represent a different chapter in the messy trial and error story of human nutrition.
Well, that is really interesting. I never knew that history of vitamin naming, but that makes a lot more sense why it seems so hectic and all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if we're ever just going to do like a big reset. You know, it's kind of like let's start this over. Let's clean this up a little bit.
Judging by how they retroactively changed it from vitamin to vitamin to fix that issue, I feel like
creative.
They're
creative. Problem solvers. But before we wrap up, Dr. Zed, let's synthesize this episode. What are the GTH big three bangers of vitamin B12?
All right. Here are the big GTH, the GTH big three bangers of B12. Number one, just like in Dr. Whipple's time, it's important to have labs. So we covered this a little bit before, but you should be getting a number of lab values regularly. We can do a whole episode on labs maybe, but just because you are ingesting it doesn't mean your body is successfully absorbing it. We kind of went through that long chain of what has to happen to successfully absorb vitamin B12. Also, remember the symptoms can be anything from fatigue, weakness, neurological issues, so numbness and tingling, as well as cognitive disturbances. So if you're experiencing these things or you're worried about it, or just behooves you regularly to get these types of lab tests, but talk to your doctor. You can tell them about the history of B vitamins and pernicious anemia until they kind of like give in and they order you labs. And like we mentioned before, there's also some direct-to-consumer options, but they're not always covered by insurance. All right, number 2, vitamin B delivery via the grocery. Just want to go through some basic kind of like food items and doses and what you need to know there. Review. But yeah, so the recommended dietary allowance for vitamin B12 if you're over 19 years is 2.4 micrograms. And again, the bioavailability of B12 appears to be about 3 times higher in dairy products than in meat, fish, and poultry. Wow. And the bioavailability of vitamin B12 from dietary supplements is actually about 50% higher than that from food sources. So that can kind of affect the math of how much B12 you have to ingest and how much you're getting. And then in terms of the top foods for density or micrograms per serving of B12, beef liver cooked 3 ounces has about 70.7 micrograms. And then followed by big drop to like clams and oysters, shellfish is down to like 17 and 14. And then for our vegan or vegetarian listeners, nutritional yeast fortified, so different form of that Vegemite, but you can get it at most grocery stores. It's sort of that like that powder, or not that powder, but those kind of flakes that you can use to give a little bit of umami or kind of like cheesy taste. But that fortified food has about 8.3 to 24 micrograms per serving. And then it goes all the way down to like tuna and beef and dairy and whatnot.
You mentioned beef liver like being the most, 3 ounces of beef liver having 70.7 micrograms per serving. Is that, so how, if I ate 3 ounces of beef liver, like, is that way above my daily, by percent daily value?
Oh yeah. That's way above. And you'll basically pee out the extra, but you'll get way more than their daily value.
Okay. Like tons more. All right.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of getting B12 through food. And then final big banger here, number 3, supplementation. Vitamin B12 supplements are available in various forms. We covered a couple of them and how the distinct forms are important for different types of metabolic function. And so each form has these specific benefits, but make sure you discuss with your healthcare provider which might be best for you, and especially if you're taking other medications or supplements. And then just to review the effective administration routes, both oral and intramuscular routes of B12 supplementation are effective in correcting deficiencies. Oral supplements can be equally effective and convenient for many patients if you don't want to cough up the cash for a more med spa type experience.
Yeah, that's fair. I was just looking it up because I was so interested with all the things you're saying. Like, it looks like 100% of your daily value would be like 3 ounces of ground beef, like 85%, or basically like a can of tuna is around 100% of your B12. I was looking at. That's pretty interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think, I'm trying to remember, I was reading something how there's only enough intrinsic factor for a certain amount. So anything you have
like
above
a limiting
that, like,
reagent.
Exactly. So
interesting. Super interesting. Yeah, that's super cool, man.
Now that's healthy.
Thanks for that, Zeddy. But now it is time to shine a science spotlight on when it's not the lack of vitamins that kills you, but too much of the vitamins. I got a little story about polar bear livers in today's Science Spotlight.
The Science Spotlight. Yeah, science.
Well, as we've been talking about, vitamins are essential to life, but they're also a double-edged sword. While most vitamins are harmless in excess, as Ed was just talking about, your body, just flushes out the extras. Some can become toxic if you overdo it. Vitamin A is one of those outliers, a nutrient so potent that it can go from life-sustaining to life-threatening in just a few bites of the wrong food. Nowhere is this more evident than in Antarctica and the Arctic, where the livers of polar bears, seals, and other animals contain enough vitamin A to wreak havoc on the human body. This wasn't news to indigenous Arctic communities who wisely avoided eating these organs, but to the European explorers in the poles, they learned this the hard way. So I learned a little bit about this from the Science History Institute's podcast called Disappearing Spoon. Let me know if you're hiring. If you have room for one more or two more, check your email. Douglas Mawson's Antarctic expedition of 1912 is remembered as a testament to human endurance, but also as a cautionary tale about dietary taboos. While there were no polar bears in Antarctica, fun fact, Mawson managed to get himself into quite some trouble. When Mawson lost his sled dogs, his supplies, and his companions to the ice, survival meant eating whatever he had left, and that meant his loyal huskies. What Mawson didn't know was that eating the dogs' livers was like swallowing poison. The livers contain toxic levels of vitamin A, leading to a horrifying condition called hypervitaminosis A.
Man, dog's taking a big vitamin L on this episode.
For sure. Poor dog. If you're a dog listening to this, throw us an email. We're sorry. Vitamin A is essential for survival. It supports vision, immune function, and even helps produce new skin cells. But it's fat soluble, meaning excess amounts aren't flushed out like the water-soluble vitamins. Instead, the body stores vitamin A in the liver, hey, our organ of the day, and in fatty tissues. Too much can overwhelm the enzymes that break it down, leaving vitamin A to circulate in the bloodstream where it acts like a detergent, dissolving cell membranes. Not good, Zed. Not good. Symptoms start with headaches and vomiting, but in extreme cases, skin peels off in sheets. And that was Mawson's fate. Yeah. His feet, ears, and even more sensitive areas began shedding skin, leaving him exposed to the raw Antarctic elements. Owie. That is not a good place for that to be happening.
Not now, skin.
Yeah, God. Like, why can't you just fall off in sheets when I'm at home? In my own bed. Interestingly, the risk of hypervitaminosis A isn't unique to eating huskies. North Pole and Arctic animals like seals, polar bears, and foxes have even higher concentration of vitamin A in their livers, thanks to their diet of fatty fish and the need for blubber to survive the cold. Indigenous Arctic peoples knew this long before European explorers arrived. Across Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada, eating polar bear liver or seal liver is considered taboo. They recognize that consuming even a few ounces could cause severe sickness or death.
I wonder if they told any of the European explorers, or they're just watching with interest. Oh, enjoy!
There's a big continental breakfast.
Yeah,
it's polar bear liver. Hope you like it. So European explorers, however, often dismissed these warnings as superstition, which I just so rich. These are the same doofuses that are like rounding up all the redheads, being like, they're witches, boys, like, get them. And then they're like, oh, these superstitious, stupid indigenous people not eating polar bear. Well, we'll show them.
Also, like, why are they immediately going for the liver of like polar bears? Is this one of those things where it's like imbibing the organs of these powerful animals somehow gives you some of those characteristics?
Well, they're huge organs too, man. I did this, like, I'm actually going to save this information for you because I'm going to have you just do a quiz, a GTH quiz show one day, just trying to guess in order the heaviest organs. It's different for me. But that is not for today, Zed. We are on a mission. Early Arctic expeditions are littered with gruesome tales of men learning the hard way. In one case, Norwegian explorer Jans Munch and his crew consumed polar bear liver during an expedition in 1619. I bet they thought they were like the coolest people alive. You know, it's just like a question, like, go straight for the liver. But either way, got to be kind of like cool. Like, oh, I'm actually eating a polar bear. But within hours, the men suffered violent headaches, nausea, and skin peeling so extreme, they described it as their bodies molting.
Gross.
Yeah. More than half of the crew died before reaching safety. I can handle the violent headaches and the nausea. I've had that before, but I draw the line at extreme skin peeling, and for me, that polar bear juice is not worth the squeeze.
Hey, but the survivors were absolutely glowing with all their new skin, I bet.
Yeah, I bet they were just like pink and fleshy and weird.
Just polar bear liver supplement for old skin and reducing wrinkles.
What's their secret? As for Mawson's case, the situation was compounded by desperation. He lost his supplies when his companion, Belgrave Ninnis, what a name, fell into a crevasse. Damn it, Belgrave. More like Felgrave, am I right? No, that's not cool. Sorry to the Ninnis family for that one. But that sucks, by the way, falling into a crevasse. Crevasse, not a crevice, but a crevasse is a little bigger. Xavier Mertz was like another dude on the expedition. He was like a real homie with Ninnis. They wrote about each other all the time, like in their journals. And he was a teammate of Ninnis's, and he wrote, "We could do nothing, really nothing. We were standing helplessly next to a friend's grave, Belgrave. My best friend of the whole expedition." No offense, Mawson. All right.
Hope he doesn't read this.
We read a prayer in Mawson's prayer book. This was our only consolation. The last honoring we could do for our beloved friend, Ninnis. Our only comfort was the thought that the death was a straight path from a happy life. The ways of God are often difficult to explain. Yeah. So difficult to explain, right? Just saying, I don't think you probably would have died like falling into an ice crevasse or eating sled dog liver if that straight path to a happy life kept Ninnis in Surrey or wherever he was from. So difficult to explain.
Ninnis just lying at the bottom of the crevasse, just like totally fine, but it's like help. It's like, well, they're just, you can hear them reading their little poem.
Ninnis is dead. I'm not dead. Please help me out.
The narrator, Ninnis, was actually fine until his companions left him.
We'll throw some liver down for you. Please, something else.
Anything else?
Anything else? My skin is peeling. Mawson remarked in his diary, he said, 9 hours after the accident, we started back, but terribly handicapped. May God help us.
Dear diary, it is minus 20 degrees, and I missed Ninnis. That reminds me. I should write Miss Ninnis to let her know Ninnis would be missed. Sorry, Ninnis family.
Yeah, sorry, Ninnis, man. So after losing his supplies, Mawson and Xavier Mertz began rationing dog meat for survival, and they saved the soft, fatty organs, especially the livers, consider them a prized source of energy. Huzzah! We're saved. Neither
Best
knew
for
that
last.
yeah, exactly. Save it. Nice. Neither knew that Arctic huskies, like polar bears and seals, store dangerous amounts of vitamin A in their livers. Those sneaky bastards. I didn't know you were doing that. Mertz suffered the worst effects, likely due to his vegetarian background, which left him unaccustomed to digesting rich meats. Yeah, you go from vegetarian straight to your beloved dog's liver. That's tough. That's a hard swing. That's a hard ethical swing.
Also, what was he eating on this exploration?
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going to stick to my snow cones.
That's not a snow cone. No, Minnis peed over there earlier. Oh, there's lemon snow cone.
Mawson noted that his companion, Mertz, he started mentally and physically deteriorating. And so in his journal, he started noting his erratic behavior, his psychosis, and horrifyingly, he noted Mertz biting off and spitting out the tip of his own frostbitten finger. Mertz died shortly after, leaving Mawson to face the deadly Antarctic alone.
Mertz, you good, man?
Mertz.
Mertz.
Mawson's return journey was nothing short of extraordinary. Alone and severely weakened, he trekked the final 100 miles back to base camp at Camp Denison, a windswept stretch of the Antarctic coastline often called the windiest place on Earth. Come on down to the windiest place on Earth.
In Antarctica.
Yeah, sounds great. Its relentless katabatic winds, which can reach over 200 miles per hour, made it a brutal and unforgiving location for an expedition base. But hey, let's put it there anyway. Yeah, that's catabatic.
Are we worried about the winds?
Nah. Katabatic winds, by the way, are powerful, cold, and dense winds that flow downhill from an elevated spot. And they really haul ass. Perfect place to not build an ice station. At one point, Mawson, that old klutz, he fell into a crevasse himself. That would be so. I'll just be like, oh. But he was saved by only his sledge, which wedged into the ice above him. Aha! Good job, sledge.
It's like the Grinch scene, the little dog hanging up.
Yeah, exactly. You got me. Somehow he climbed out using the harness that connected him to the sled and defying exhaustion and the brutal conditions. He's really a badass.
Wow.
He's doing this all with his like, skin flopping around.
Yeah, he really made some commitments back home.
Yeah, for sure. I will be back. When Mawson finally staggered into Cape Denison, the rescue ship Aurora had left just hours earlier.
Oh, my God.
I think at that point I would just take a big husky liver right to the face. Oh, brutal. A wireless message recalled this ship like, hey, I'm alive. But bad weather thwarted the rescue attempt. Like, hey, sorry, man. We'll be back. I am having a very, very bad vacation. Mawson and 6 men who had stayed behind to search for him were forced to stay another winter in Antarctica, for a second year. So, and despite the horror show of an excursion during his time waiting to get picked up, Mawson ended up documenting the geology, biology, and meteorology of the region, while more precisely defining the South Magnetic Pole's location. I bet those 6 other men were super resentful once they saw Mawson just like happily going back to like performing science experiments, and they're like, dude, we're here for another year with you, man. Like, I'm glad you're keeping busy, but like,
the ship sailing away and Mawson just being like, oh, that's fine, just
cool.
Got some stuff
hi,
I was
I have
curious
6
about.
new friends now. I'm gonna call you all Ninnis.
And a lot of curiosity.
Yeah. And some other taboos were explored that year. but hey, Mawson survived, though not without a cost. He endured peeling skin, crippling headaches, and at one point even had to tie the soles of his feet back on with bandages after they detached.
Jesus.
Not ideal. His survival, though, highlights the brutal ingenuity required of explorers, but also a stark truth. Sometimes taboos are there for a reason. But like, not that like Mawson was like sitting in this ice cave looking at his dog like, what if I just treat myself to your liver? That wouldn't be so bad, would it? Oh, I'm so naughty. Wouldn't that be bad if I ate your liver?
a spot of dog liver. That would be just the thing.
His harrowing survival story, detailed in his book, Home of the Blizzard, earned him accolades, including the Royal Geographical Society's Founders Medal in 1915 and the David Livingstone Centenary Medal in 1916. A couple of the big ones, a couple of the big 19-teens exploration medals that you could get. Congrats to him. He achieved greatness, but at an unimaginable personal cost. And polar bear liver, by the way, specifically remains one of the most toxic foods on Earth, containing levels of vitamin A that far exceed what humans can tolerate. 1 ounce can deliver more than 100 times the daily recommended intake, making it a biochemical landmine for the unprepared. But I'm not sure if you're ever really prepared to eat polar bear meat. It seems like it's always kind of a desperation move. But like if you're lucky enough to like not have the polar bear not eating human liver is the goal, I think. There.
Right.
So if you're ever stranded in the Arctic or Antarctica, take a cue from indigenous wisdom. Eat the meat, leave the liver.
Wise words. Wow, I had no idea. Not that I was going to accidentally do that, but again, incredible harrowing tale of survival. We've talked about this before, but there are so many instances there where I'd have been just like, yeah, my soles, my feet soles have detached. Maybe this is it for me. Maybe
I think at that point
is
when I try to detach my metaphysical soul from my body.
Yeah.
But Zed, we could talk about this all day, and we should. But it is time now for our Fastfire Questions.
Gordy and Zed's Fastfire Questions.
That's right, Zed. And it is time for our first question, which is, would you rather?
Would you rather?
Zed, would you rather eat raw vegan? Raw vegan. I'm defining that. I didn't know what the words are, but just like raw food. You can't like eat a vegan pizza from like Whole Foods or something. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking like raw vegetables, no unprocessed, straight up.
Right.
Maybe you're already doing that. I don't know. You had to eat it for a year, but you can't have any vitamins or supplements. So no protein powders, anything like that. Or would you rather eat a carnivore diet for a year, but with the same stipulations? You can't like have your green powder or whatever,
Yeah, I
like
forget.
fiber.
I forget off the top of my head if you can get like a complete nutrient profile from just the carnivore diet. I feel like you can if you eat all the right organs. But
All right, let's get out of your head for a second. What is your
Would I
gut
rather-
feel?
well,
Like,
I
what do
think
you
just
feel
from-
like?
Well, from a survival perspective, or at least from a health perspective, I'd rather have something that has a complete nutrient profile. So even though if I preferentially just eating food-wise, I'd way prefer the raw vegan. I think
Yeah.
I'd have to go carnivore because
Yeah.
I just learned a lot about vitamin B12.
I know that's tough because it will be a tough year, but like, I
also
don't want
like-
to eat meat for a year.
liver,
Straight.
yeah.
I feel like there's not as much diversity of food too. You know what I mean? You're kind of
Yeah.
like, another day, another liver.
Another kidney, or maybe
Yeah.
it's an acquired taste.
Well,
what would you do?
Well, I think
We'll
I
do
would. I think I would honestly do the. I don't know. I think it would be really hard for me to get enough protein without. I don't know. Could I get like 150 grams to 200 grams of protein without any supplementation of a vegetable? I feel like I'll be eating a lot of. What will I be
Lentils.
eating? A lot of rice and beans and stuff.
A lot of lentils, a lot of
Yeah.
tempeh, tofu. Yeah,
I think I might
That
just feel
qualifies.
pretty gross. So I think I'll have to do the carnivore one too, and then just have a big salad on New Year's Day next year. But
see you in
so
a
now
year.
it's time for the next question, which is, how much money we talking?
How much money we talking?
How much money we talking? All right, let's just bring it back to that first one. How much money we talking to do the losing diet for a year? So let's say you already agreed that you're going to do the carnivore diet for a year. How much money would you have to get paid to potentially have a nutritional diet for a year on just the plants?
I'm trying to think how bad the nutritional deficiency would get in the course of a year. Like pretty bad. Money. It would be nice if it were could at least offset any
The cost of
would be
food?
at least, like pay the hospital bills, and like it wasn't irreversible. Yeah, if it wasn't irreversible damage, I could go for anywhere around like, I don't know, like 50K or something. But if it's irreversible neurological
Yeah.
damage, yeah, I'd want something to really offset that, like in the millions range.
75K.
Yeah, 75K.
That's cool. That's an acceptable answer, and that's correct. You got that one right.
Oh, nice.
And now, Zed, it is time for our final question. The one that is not a question. It is time for Shock the Doc.
Shock the Doc.
Zed, get ready to get shocked, brother. Your average cumulus cloud, cumulus, Latin for heap. Think like accumulate. That's where accumulate comes from. The average cumulus cloud weighs over 1.1 million pounds, according to a U.S. Geological Survey website, or the U.S. Geological Survey website. Not just one of the not one of the fan pages. I mean the U.S. Geological Survey website. It says it's the same as 100 elephants. like they think I deal with large quantities of elephants.
Some
And
elephants.
Like that helps. Oh yeah, 100
all
elephants.
clicks
Okay,
into
yeah.
place.
I lift that all. That makes sense. Like I think like that's a
Pounds?
real like yeah. I feel like that's like a heads up to be like we should probably switch to metric if like everything has to be like rationalized and like an African element like an animal that we don't even see on a daily basis.
Right. Just like, elephants are big, so 100 of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Like okay, all right.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure you could find like 1,000 really tiny elephants. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
But yeah, how about that? So a million, over 1 million pounds. So think about that when it's above you, just like that could fall on you at any second.
Yeah. But it's such a lesson, I guess, in density and how that works. You're like, how could 100 elephants stay in the air? Answer, Dumbo.
Boom. And that's exactly what it is. The clouds have wings. No, these are just giant fluffy reservoirs of water vapor that are all spread out and suspended by air currents. So yeah, maybe that's how you put 1.1 million pounds up there.
I was trying to think of a burn on you, but you are looking lean and fit.
Thank you. That was really nice of you. Awesome. Right back at you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. That was so sweet of you. Thanks for listening to Going Through Health with Gordy and Zed. Listen each week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. New episodes available early Monday morning. Follow us, rate and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Please give us 5 stars. Whatever the most is, make sure you are following us and you didn't accidentally unfollow us. At goingthroughhealth.podcast on Instagram. Give us a follow there. Great content coming out a lot. Any questions, concerns? Do you know who unfollowed us on Spotify? You want to apologize? Email us at gordyandzed@gmail.com, and together we will get to the bottom of this. Thank you, Zed.
Thank you, Gordy. And just writing you a quick prescription for the most important B vitamin of them all.
What's
Be
that?
yourself.
Stay healthy, my friends.
Hey, this is Zed. This podcast is intended solely for general informational purposes and does not represent the provision of medical advice or the practice of any professional healthcare services. No clinician-patient relationship is formed. Nice try. And the use of the information provided or materials linked is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not meant to replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should seek medical advice for any health issues they may have and should consult their healthcare providers for any such concerns.